The Obama administration is reportedly close to announcing sanctions against Russia for interfering in the presidential election. According to the Washington Post, the announcement could come as early as this week. Let's bring in Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, a former Florida congressman and Fox News contributor. Colonel West, good to see you this morning. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you, Sandra, and Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year to you. Well, Russia denies playing a role in the hacking of Democratic operatives. What's your take on the U.S. imposing sanctions?
Well, first of all, I find it a little bit hypocritical because we know that there were Obama campaign operatives that went to Israel to try to influence the elections and the re-election of Prime Minister Netanyahu. So I guess we can expect sanctions against the United States of America from Netanyahu. But let's really get to the bottom of this. If Russia had any impact on our elections, I think that is very marginal. I don't remember Vladimir Putin running any campaign advertisements on TV or in our newspapers or what have you. I think this continues to be a bit of a straw man, but it should lend us to have better cybersecurity in our operations here in the United States of America. I think that's the bigger point that we need to be looking at. But with 23 days to go, I don't think that the Obama administration can do anything that's going to have a lasting impact on Russia and their advancing foreign policy interests all over the globe.
Also, Colonel West, there are reports that Turkey and Russia have agreed on a ceasefire in Syria. This comes after Syrian regime forces regained control of Aleppo. Colonel West, do you expect this ceasefire to last?
No, I don't expect the ceasefire to last. You can see what is happening in Syria, where Russia, Iran, and Turkey are advancing their interests. And remember, this was an Obama administration that talked about a red line in Syria, that talked about Bashar al-Assad must go. And that's why I think this whole thing about sanctions against Russia for involvement in our elections is not really the issue. The issue going into the future Trump administration is how we're going to deal with Russia that now has a foothold very strongly in the Middle East and also the hegemonic dominance that we see of Iran.
Lindsey Graham, Senator Lindsey Graham said 99% of the senators believe that Russia was interfered in the election. And to stand back and allow Russia, who's ascending in its power because of a feckless Obama administration, to stand back now and do nothing about that hacking, that alleged hacking, that makes us even weaker.
Well, you know, Dagan, when you think about when President Obama sat down and talked about his flexibility that he would have after re-election, now we see the results of that.
Colonel West, Leah Gabriel here. You know, Russia just said yesterday that the U.S. decision to ease restriction on arming Syrian rebels had opened the way for deliveries of shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles, basically referring to the signing of the National Defense Authorization Act. Isn't this just more meddling from Russia in our internal affairs here in the United States?
Well, yes, you're going to continue to see Vladimir Putin is going to push his hand because the Obama administration has allowed that to happen. And when you look at what is happening in Syria, where they have brought in those new S-300 missile systems, the surface-to-air missile systems, when you know that you have Iran that is openly acting there as a ally of Russia in Syria, and we see what Russia has been able to do here in the United States of America, is because we have not stood up to them. And what I'm saying is that I don't know in the next 23 days if that's really going to change. It's going to be up to a new administration to take a higher stand and to get a high ground against Russia and start to push back against them. And that's where we need to look at how we have better engagement with NATO. We need to look at what we're doing there in the Ukraine as well as with the Baltic states.
Colonel West, what are we going to do with the United Nations? How is America going to interact going forward over the next 4 years? How do relations differ from what we see today?
Well, when you look at what just happened in the United Nations Security Council, I think that was very deplorable. Once again, I think the United Nations is now a collection of despots, dictators, and autocrats. 99.9% of the time, they're voting against Israel or against American interests. So we have to, once again, take a high ground with the United Nations and get it refocused. And we have to play tough ball. You know, we're the largest contributor to the United Nations, and we need to start looking at how we can influence them by way of cutting off the funding that we send to the United Nations or to some of these member states that are not in keeping with our principles and values.
So how do we balance that with our humanitarian efforts? I mean, I agree with you that, you know, I think we're 22% of the total budget for the UN, which is a huge number. But how do we balance that when we have to take on refugees in Syria? We got to help try to feed some of the poorest people on earth. I mean, that's a very difficult balance.
Well, the United States is without a doubt one of the greatest humanitarian nations in the world. I don't think we need the United Nations to do that. When you look at what is happening in Syria, I don't see the United Nations there. When you think about some of the past genocides and other incidents, I don't see the United States there. When there is a tsunami and other instances of man-caused disasters, I don't see the United Nations there. I do see the Stars and Stripes of the United States of America. So I think that we have always been a humanitarian nation, but we don't need to find ourselves in a position of compromise where we're trying to appease and acquiesce to a world body politic that really is not in concert with our principles and values.
All right, Colonel West, we're also learning these 3 Chinese traders earned millions in illegal profits after hacking into the email accounts of prominent U.S. law firms. Colonel West, what does this say about the severity of the cybersecurity threat that we continue to face in this country?
Well, that is probably the new frontier of the 21st century battlefield, and we have to have that delicate balance of how do we work with our homeland security to make sure that we have a strong domestic cybersecurity program. If you look recently at the newest Chinese fighter that is out there, is very similar to the F-35 fighter that we have here, the stealth fighter, because there have been immense instances of hacking into our defense industry and to other systems here in the United States of America, as you just talked about. So that's one of the key things we have to do going forward. And we probably need to start thinking about how do we not just thwart them, but how do we take offensive actions as well in the cyber realm.
I looked at our resident fighter pilot, Leah Gabriel, kind of nodded along with that. Your thoughts?
Well, what I was actually wanting to turn to is, you mentioned cybersecurity, and of course, President-elect Trump has tapped Tom Bossert to be his assistant for Homeland Security and counterterrorism, and Bossert is known as a cybersecurity expert. In the first year of the administration, it's going to be very important that an effective national security strategy is outlined and put into place. That will basically set the pace for the next 4 years. What do you think are going to be the key issues for the new Homeland Security strategy?
Well, I think it's a great thing that we have General Kelly that's going to be in charge of our Homeland Security, because we have to start looking at America as being a part of this new battlefield, being it cybersecurity or the threats that are coming in from the South, Southern Command into this country, with transnational crime organizations. We also have Islamic jihadist groups that are using our porous border to get infiltration routes into the United States of America. So I think those are the 2 most important things, are securing our border to make sure that we are reducing the impact of illegal immigration, the drugs that are coming in, and also the Islamic jihadist groups that are infiltrating. But cybersecurity is another important aspect because it will have an economic impact sooner or later.
Colonel West is a seriously smart guy, and he's a serious guy, and we always appreciate having you on.
I don't know about all that.
But you're a lot of fun, too, and it was fun catching up with you during the conventions and all that. Do you have any New Year's resolutions, Colonel West? I mean, what does Colonel West say he's going to do in 2017?
Well, I think, the most important thing is to continue to be a good and trustful servant of this great nation. Going back to a dad who served in World War II and to a nephew who's still serving in the United States Army, that's what we've always done. And I just want to continue to be a good dad to my 2 daughters. And that's just about it.
You're an amazing man. Colonel West, good to see you. Happy New Year to you, sir, and
Happy
to your wonderful family as well. All right.